joined today by Rachel Altvater and Stephanie Ford from Maryland, Baltimore. Yeah. So welcome, Rachel, and welcome, Stephanie. How are you doing today?
I feel like today's a good day.
Today's a good day? Yeah.
I'm doing well.
All right. So on this podcast, we kind of share, stories, stories about mental health, stories about, whatever you're comfortable sharing. But really, like, I'm interested to know maybe how the both of you became a therapist and what got you into it.
Before starting this talk today, I was actually thinking about that. It was like, how I first thought about becoming a therapist. And I think like initially the hope is I want to help people and I want to make a difference. And, I just kind of feel like I've been a helper throughout my life. And I feel like that's like a very simplified answer. I think that there's a lot more complexities to what actually encouraged me to go down this line of work. And I was reflecting on that for a bit. And, going all the way back when I was a wee little lad, but when I was a child, I was a peer mediator in, I think it was elementary school. And so at my elementary school, there were students who kind of like helped guidance counselors resolve different conflicts or things that came up with the other students. And to be honest, when I was applying to grad school and that question was asked, I completely forgot. But I think that it's just been kind of a part of me from a very young age to want to help people. And I guess that was recognized. And then something I might get a little bit more into as we talk is as I entered into my teenage years, my mom had a lot of health issues. And I think I really connect with teenagers because I really could have used therapy support at that time in my life, but I didn't even know that that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of found it along the way. I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe seeking some answers for myself, maybe just, again, as part of my ingrained nature. I don't know, but yeah, here we are.
What led you to find it or seek it out? Because I know, like, as a teenager, or maybe it was just me, I was so oblivious to things like that, right? Whatever was kind of going on was just the norm for me. So yeah, how did you seek it out?
Yeah, this is going to sound like I'm about to like jump off to a different topic, but it is totally related. I wanted to be a famous singer. No joke. I wanted to be a famous singer, but then I wanted to have a youth group that I could a place where youth could go and I don't know, just receive support or hang out. Like that was my vision. I was going to be famous. I'm just going to say, I'm glad that didn't work out. But I wanted to do that. And then, and have a safe haven for teens. And I actually was going to go to undergrad and major in vocal performance, and then decided to go to school undecided, and was in a class one day. And usually in the undergrad classes, the professors would go around and say, "Oh, what's your major?" And I'm like, "Great, they're going to get to me." And I'm going to be like, "Oh, it's undecided. I don't know." But the person that was sitting in front of me said, "I'm majoring in psychology. I'm minoring in family studies. I want to be a child psychologist." And I thought, "Oh, that sounds so great. I would love to do that." So then I decided to major in psychology, minor in family studies, and then just continue to take different classes along the way. And I had exposure to art therapy, which is another form of expressive therapy in undergrad. At some point, I was interested in seeking music therapy to do music therapy. So there's just been this like connection between expressive creative arts and psychology. And so I just kind of continued to get experience along the way and ended up deciding to go to grad school and ended up learning about play therapy, which I'm now a registered play therapist supervisor. I specialize in incorporating play in practice when I work with kids. And yeah, and then here I am. So it's kind of like the different stepping stones along the way kind of led me to the next stepping stone. But the start, when I started this whole journey, I thought I was going to do something completely different. So it's a little bit about my decisions.
I love it. I love it though, because I think a lot of times, whether we have the specific, career or thing that we see ourselves in, or we're absolutely lost, somehow we find a way.
I love that. Gosh, that's so true. That's so true.
Yeah. So in kind of doing your, I guess, play therapy and all these, other expressive arts and play therapy and all of that, you kind of do have that safe haven for teens or kids and kids.
That's so true. And one of my favorite parts about my practice, I own a group private practice in Maryland, in the United States, on the outskirts of Baltimore. And it's actually at the end of the street where I grew up. I caught my bus right in front of the building that we're in. It just so happened to work out that way, but I wanted to open up my practice in my hometown, which I think was really like a way to connect back to my roots and provide support to the children and teens in my hometown community. What I wish I would have known was there, and what I wish I would have probably gotten, at that point in time in my life. And it's just so cool to think how close I am to where I grew up. And I think it just adds this extra element of connection and purpose and enjoyment. So it's
That's
cool.
that's so awesome. That's so cool. Does it does it bring you back? Bring back whether it's memories or just brings back maybe sometimes how you felt as a teen, as a child growing up there. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, like in a way, I definitely feel like there is some internal healing that occurs being able to provide this healing space in that area. It's kind of in a way like I'm therapizing myself. I like to say therapize, if that's a word, but I like it, so we're using it.
I like it.
Yeah. So I think so. I think it's definitely like a reparative experience for myself. And it's not something that I always think about so readily or so consciously, but I'm sure that there is, ongoing work that's being done there. And it's just so heartwarming to be able to provide this safe haven for these kids in my hometown, and also normalizing. And I think that's something that I love so much about your podcast, is just normalizing mental health.
Mhm.
And when I see how many children and teens really could use the support, of course, in some regards, it hurts my heart for them that they are struggling. And I'm so grateful to be a space for that healing, and to know how many children and teens could really use the support normalizes it, right? And also is a kind of a reparative experience. When we're going through things ourselves, we feel like we're alone. We feel like we're the only one.
Oh my
Sometimes,
gosh, yes.
like a lot of times, but I don't want to make absolute statements. I know everyone's a little different, who's listening. And I think that there's a part of all of us as human beings who wonder, am I the only one? Is this okay? And I think seeing that so many other people wonder the same thing and encounter the same thing in different ways, of course, it really shows how normal and how important mental health is. And one thing I like to say with that is, there are statistics out there that say, I don't know, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. I forget the exact statistic, but something along those lines, is experiences a mental illness or mental health struggles. And I always say 5 out of 5 people encounter mental health. 5 out of 5 people experience physical health.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it might come out in different ways. And it's not to say that everybody who encounters mental health difficulties, has a mental health illness. And it's so normal for every single person to encounter something mentally to some degree. That's part of the human experience. So I always like to share that.
I absolutely agree with that. And regardless of how people deal with it, some, better than others, some have the tools, some don't. I think it's absolutely, like, we all go through things, and we all should be able to have a place to, whether it's to process it or share it, or do whatever it is that we need to do with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm so happy that people in the outskirts of Baltimore, where you grew up, get that space.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Stephanie? How did you get into becoming a therapist?
Well, thinking about it, I think it all started with Google.
Good old Google.
Good old Google. When I was young, I wouldn't say a kid, not to like, I'm on the verge of dating myself. It doesn't, but, like late childhood. I didn't understand things that felt normal to other people. I would Google stuff like, how to talk to people in class, or why am I so tired? And my Google results kept leading me to Psychology Today. And I was like, what is this magical website that has all these answers to my questions? So I started to learn more about psychology through Psychology Today and learning about what it is. And I would go to my local libraries. That was my favorite place to go. I'm definitely a book nerd. And I would sit in the library, and there was a whole section about psychology. And I would just sit there and read all these books. And then as I got older and entered the scary years of teenagedom, I was encountering more actual experiences with therapy and mental health. And I realized that I understood these things deeper than how the books were trying to describe them. And I realized it was a strength to have that knowledge. And I realized that these were skills that I could gain from books, but experiences that I couldn't gain from books. And thought, hey, together, that would probably make a pretty good therapist and someone that can help the people that may be Googling and ending up on Psychology Today. So it started a little bit as, therapizing myself, as Rachel said. And yeah, I stuck on the track. I realized I wanted to be a therapist in high school. It was the only classes I really put my all into, was those psych classes. And I did it all through college, and I went straight through grad. So it's been my life since then.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So in reading and getting into the books and getting into, the Psychology Today website, and feeling like, what you read really, really speaks to you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, one, Googling questions that I was like, I am for sure the only person feeling this way. And then pulling up an article that made it feel like, wow, a lot of people feel this way. So there was this normalization to it. And it opened me feeling more comfortable to talking to people around me and saying, hey, is this weird for you too? And they would say, yeah. So then it led a little bit to me feeling kind of becoming this person that would take this Psychology Today knowledge and go to my friends and say, hey, I found this little skill that Psychology Today taught me. Well, I wouldn't say Psychology Today, I would say this magical skill that I just found out of nowhere. But yeah, they had research, which to have research, that has to be a question that's asked a lot, right? And yeah, so there's the normalization of Psychology Today, and they had skills, and sometimes just the way things were worded showed me that it was normal, and they got it in a way that I felt like I was the only person that got it.
Right. So it brought that kind of connection for you, and not feeling alone.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's like our theme here today.
Same exact thing. I thought the same thing. We are so on the same page.
Where I think a lot of times when we're struggling and going through things, we feel like we're all alone and I'm the only one. But if we just dared to kind of maybe reach out, whether it's through Google, because you know Google is amazing. However, it's also very scary, and you know, I don't want the kids and the teens listening to just self-diagnose them on Google. But it is, you know, a vast majority of information. But to be able to like pull that information and perhaps be able to talk to people, whether it is a therapist or, you know, close friends or close adults and friends and people around you that you trust, goes a long way.
Yeah. I would clarify that at this time, Google had a little bit less knowledge or an influx of mental health just spattered all over it. And also looking back now at some of those Psychology Today articles, while Psychology Today is very great, I can see some flaws in how they were written. So it got me into it, but I wouldn't recommend it being where people stay if they're looking for help.
No, please don't stay on the internet for these things. I mean, it's a good resource just to maybe get people started, or maybe even search up how to have the conversation.
Yeah, and something I always like to share with everybody is just be good consumers of what you are digesting online. You know, I think that a lot of times when we are a little bit more easily influenced by what we're reading, we can take things face value, and it's important for us to make sure that we are looking at sites that are a bit more credible and that we aren't searching for things where we're trying to get a very specific response. What I mean by that is, you know, I don't know, trying to like narrow the search to find something very specific that could be opinion based. So I just want to throw that out there as well. But I definitely echo what Stephanie and you were just saying.
Yeah. Awesome. So we kind of, you know, as therapists, I think a lot of people come into our office and think we have our lives all together. Everything's like, you know, we have our I's dots, our T's crossed, and all of that. And I don't know about you guys. I can't speak for you guys, but I know absolutely I don't have that. And a lot of it is figuring things out in life. And, you know, I have gone through my own experiences, my own things. I was wondering maybe what are some of the things that you two have healed from or have, you know, gone through that can maybe shed some light into the audience of you know, therapists and having that that image of everything is perfect.
Perfectionism is screamed so loudly in my head, and I know through doing my own self-exploration, my own therapeutic work, that I got very busy as a way to cope. Instead of me like sitting and, you know, feeling, I think all the feels, I dove into my work. And, you know, we all cope with life in different manners. And the way I coped was becoming an overachiever, overworking, basically focusing on what I had control over and just trying to soar with it. And really, I was reinforced for that, right? Nobody said, okay, Rachel, this might not be the healthiest way to go about managing your emotions, right? Good job. Like, yes, gold star. And so then it just reinforced me continuing to push forward and try to do things perfect and do all the things and get really busy. And like that started in high school. I was the president of the National Honor Society. I was, on the cheerleading team. I was very involved in extracurriculars and volunteering, and I had a job and I coached rec cheerleading. I mean, I did a lot of stuff. And
wow.
That slowed down through my whole educational career because I trained myself to do that. And with that came a lot of perfectionism, came a lot of expectation. I kind of put a lot of pressure on myself, and it was coming from an internal area, right? It wasn't coming, nobody was saying you need to do all of this. It's just the way I started to cope. And I didn't realize that then, but I have since realized that. A lot of times when we're in it, we just kind of try to survive or manage or cope or whatever it may be to get through whatever it is that we're going through. Then sometimes it gets to a place where like, wait, is this the healthiest? Even though we might be getting messages that it is, right? If it doesn't align with us fully, then it's important for us to self-reflect on that a little bit more. So that perfectionism piece ties perfectly in with what you were just saying. Perfect, not perfect. I keep using that word, but we're not. I think that gave an illusion to other people that I had it all together and that, things are perfect. And so I felt like I had to like live up to that. I felt like, and that again was this own internal pressure. It was all my own perception, all my own expectations and requirements that I was placing on myself. And I've since realized the importance of shedding myself of that. Like I felt like I had to constantly prove myself to advance in my education and advance in my career. And I mean, it did serve me well, right? It was in some ways adaptive, but it also trained me to work sometimes in an unhealthy manner and expect perfectionism. So I think it's so important to help shed light on that when working with clients. And that's not to say that I'm sharing that about my own story, but I use my own lessons that I've gained through my life to then hopefully shed some light for other people if they're encountering maybe similar, or I'll just say similar kinds of difficulties, right? With perfectionism or overworking or whatever it may be. And being able to understand that on a deep level is helpful. And I also recognize, of course, everyone's experiences are different. So there still will be some differences, but I think that authentic connection and understanding and validation, empathy, sympathy in some regards in that space has really driven my work and has helped me help my clients. And I think when I bring my authentic self into everything that I do, like the way I'm talking here is the way I am with my friends and family, is the way I am with my clients. Like, of course, I'm professional and personable, depending on the context, but I think fully bringing my authentic self and showing people it's okay to be who you are. And it's okay that you went through the things that you went through in your life, and you can shed yourself of these, potentially unhealthy or unrealistic expectation or whatever it may be, that it's okay and you're not alone in that, and this is part of the human experience. So that's my thought with what you just asked.
I resonate with that so well. What would you say to the people listening out there, and it's like, oh yes, that's me, and also like society has this really it's well received when we're busy.
Yeah.
It's almost like our lives should be full of all these stuff or things, even though maybe we're feeling, oh, it's so much. What would you say to the people who are feeling that way?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is always proceed with self-compassion. I think it's really easy for us to be hard on ourselves, to give ourselves messages that are detrimental really, and sometimes it becomes our inner voice, our automatic thoughts. And it's really easy for us to, I like to say, should all over the place. That should, should all over the place, right? Like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be like this, I shouldn't be doing that, right? And when we place all these expectations on ourselves, we make it so much harder for ourselves. But if we say, you know what, I'm a human and I'm responding in the way that I am, or I'm doing the things that I'm doing, or whatever, insert whatever makes sense for you, does this align with me? Do I really have to I don't know, do all the things that I'm placing these expectations on myself? I don't really have to be hard on myself. I'm just trying to figure it out, right? Like, kind of, I think, going inward a bit more. But when you start from a place of self-compassion and understanding, when you go inward, the healing and the work becomes, I don't want to say easier, but becomes more compassionate, more connecting, more validating, and more empathetic. And I think that being able to just be real with yourself from a place of love and care is the first step. And then it's figuring out, okay, what supports do I have in place, or what supports would I like to put in place to further help me with this? Because we as a species, we as humans have thrived because we rely on one another in one way, shape, or form, right? Thinking back like centuries and centuries ago, in communities, and different people within a community would have different jobs. Like, everybody works together to support one another, right? So I say that because when it comes to helping ourselves through things, our nature is to rely on other people when it's safe enough to do so. I do want to emphasize that, because I do recognize some relationships for some of the people that might be listening might not be healthy or safe, right? So that's what I was saying, either use the support you have or to find new support, such as a therapist, or other avenues that you can take to feel connected to people. But I think being able to heal in the presence of another person is the next step to really help us work through what we need to work through and get to a place that we want to be.
You said that so well. And you mentioned that being busy was your way of managing your emotions, your way of coping. Now looking back with all these wonderful knowledge and going through what you've gone through, how would you recommend managing emotions for our listeners?
Yeah, I always say the only way over is through. And so really allowing yourself to feel your feelings, that there are times where we're going to need to take a step away from our feelings till we get to a place of emotional safety, right? Like, sometimes it's just too much, it's too intense, whatever the feeling may be. And if our body is not feeling emotionally safe, it's not really the time or space to be trying to process. Now, I do also want to give the caveat that sometimes when we're working through our feelings, it might feel a little unsafe. And I don't mean unsafe in terms of like wanting to harm yourself, because then that's another we would take another step to make sure that there are additional supports in place. But I mean, really being able to get to an emotionally safe enough place to allow ourselves to feel. So many times people will self-medicate, and that's in a variety of ways, right? Different ways. Self-medication for me was getting really busy. Self-medication for somebody else might be, binge watching shows, right? Or alcohol or drugs or other things, right? Things to help us numb. And if we're able to utilize techniques in our lives to help us escape momentarily, but that aren't bad for our mind and body, that will help bring our body, our nervous system, to a place of safety. And then we can start to really sit with and explore and process our emotions. Anytime we use any type of avoidant technique, and again, avoidant techniques that are good for our mind and body. So, for example, taking a nap, or I mean, watching a show, right? I mean, that's not, it's not necessarily a negative thing. We always want to come back and use a cathartic skill. Catharsis is feeling your feelings. So that could be talking about it, writing about it, listening to music, things that help your emotions move through your body in a healthy way.
Yay. What's the one recommendation for that you like to do to do that?
I'm a huge proponent of self-care, and in implementing self-care as part of a balance in our lives. And sometimes that's hard. But I recently moved, and I love walking around the neighborhood late at night with my husband and dog. It is just such a beautiful connecting experience. The sky is just huge, and I'm able to just be so mindful. You know, I can look at the stars, and I ground myself. That's something I love. Another big thing, which I probably should have said first, I have my own therapist. I actually am meeting with my therapist after this. And it's one of my favorite hours every single week, to be able to just have support. I want to say therapists receive therapy too. It's so normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with receiving therapy. You know, I think that something that we've kind of danced around but haven't actually articulated yet is there's a huge stigma associated with mental illness and mental health. It has shifted. I think society is recognizing that it actually isn't a bad thing to be a normal human being and have normal human experience, have mental health, right? But you know, I just want to say, like, seeing a therapist is so wonderful, and I'm looking forward to that. So she definitely is a huge source of support for me and being able to process some of the things I need. And that is definitely a coping skill that I love. I'm also just very creative. So I recently bought some Lego sets, and I like built Legos, and I like to write. So sometimes I'll write different creative things. Because I'm an expressive based therapist, we sometimes do something in therapy called sand tray. So I have like a little mini sand tray at home in my at-home office, and like these little toys. And so sometimes I can make my own sand trays, and it just helps process things in a nonverbal way. So those are some of the things I really like to do.
You brought up building Lego, and building Lego is one of my favorite things to do as well. I'm also a play therapist, and there's something about it where, you know, it's therapeutic. It's, you know, it's just, you just get to tap into your creativity. And I would say, like, even for adults, because I think a lot of times, you know, when we quote unquote grow up, we stop playing, or we stop nurturing that childhood in us. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
For childhood, you're spot on. Absolutely. And I think sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable for us, because as adults, because we have been conditioned to stop playing. You need to work. It's like, that's the whole thing we're talking about, that sometimes is an issue for people, is too much work, not enough play.
Yes, balance. I think you've also mentioned are kind of that key word that all of us therapists throw out there, and that's, you know, being mindful and being grounded. Even though I love it, I think people should be present all the time. Do you think that's like one of the words that is maybe like used too much, or that maybe people don't really understand it?
Yes, absolutely. I do, on one hand, love the normalcy of some of the psychology lingo, for sure, because, you know, when more people are able to use the words and understand the words, it definitely helps with healing as a collective. Simultaneously, I think sometimes things are a buzzword, just like I throw out self-care. Sometimes it's like, oh yes, engage in self-care. And some people listening might be like, how? I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this on my schedule, and I barely have enough time to meet some of my basic needs, right? And so I think sometimes self-care, mindfulness, a variety of different psychology-based terms maybe are kind of thrown around. And something else with mindfulness that I'm thinking about too is because it's more normalized and more people are talking about it, and like meditation and different avenues for relaxation and coping, I think there's this expectation, back to shoulding all over the place, that like people feel like they should be able to do it, or it should be helpful for them, and not everything is going to be helpful for everybody. You know, it is helpful to come back to the present moment and to try to ground ourselves. And if we're not in a place of emotional safety, sometimes it's really hard to do that.
Mhm.
And so I also just want to say, at the same time, anyone listening, don't feel like you have to do something because somebody said this is what you should do to feel better. Everybody is different. And I think it's good to absorb some of the feedback and to maybe try out some of the different things. But just because it's something you've heard doesn't mean it's going to necessarily work for you. And that is okay. That does not mean there's anything wrong with you. And that doesn't mean that, you know, other things won't work for you. So I recently saw a therapist thread where therapists were saying, like, meditation isn't helpful for me, and I feel like it should be because all these people are saying it should be, and it's not. And I just thought how great that was that so many other therapists themselves were having this conversation with one another and feeling normal in that space. So yeah, just being mindful of what you're hearing and doing additional research. As we said, be good consumers of the research, and you know, seeing what really aligns with you. Because as I said, first step is really reflecting inward. When you reflect inward and you connect to yourself in a compassionate way, you're going to find things that align with you, and trust yourself in that. That's really important. So I think I went off more than what you were just asking about. Well, it's all important. So sharing it all.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, Stephanie, like, what are some things that you do to, I guess, heal and self-care? And
Yeah, I mean, similar to Rachel, I talk a lot about self-care. I I always encourage the creation of a self-care plan. And I normalize this by saying that as our days are different, self-care is gonna look really different. There are days where on my self-care plan, I want to do yoga. I have to be in a pretty solid place to have yoga be my self-care. Some days, self-care is getting out of bed. It depends on where you're at. And I think that that is a disservice that comes with this capitalization of self-care. That it doesn't mean, you know, I have to get a bath bomb, take a bath every day, do yoga, meditate for 50 minutes, and, you know, then I'll be happy. Sometimes it's eating a good meal, you know? So for me, it's a lot of going out in nature. I'm a big tree hugger, as in like I literally hug trees. I'm a big fan. But I have on my self-care plan, I do once a day, I call it 30 minutes of being. And this has grown over time. Like, it has kind of become the being. It started off as 30 minutes every day of yoga. And then I realized that some days that's just not going to happen. And then it gradually became the root of what I was really looking for, which is 30 minutes of just being a person in this moment and not thinking about yesterday or thinking about tomorrow or tonight or this morning, just right now. So sometimes 30 minutes of being is me sitting staring at a tree for 30 minutes. And that's fine with me. And giving myself that grace that I'm the one that created it. I'm the one that gets to decide what's good for today and what's good for tomorrow. And no one else made this plan for me, so I don't have to go to anybody else's expectations. So yeah, I do yoga pretty often, but that came with creating that habit. And I do it at home. I really enjoy doing yoga with Adrienne. I find that she's very calming, and she makes it like therapeutic and normal, and I don't know, I like it. So I find doing that is very helpful for me. Sometimes it's playing with my cat. And then the more cathartic things, which, I'm a normal human. Feelings are scary. Like, it's hard to do that cathartic stuff. But I do also recognize after years of resisting it and not wanting to do it, that I do feel better afterwards. So I do a lot with like music. I like to listen to music that helps me feel. I'll journal. Um, and yeah, I try to, it's a lot with mentality and learning those moments where I'm feeling something and I can tell my brain is going to something else and trying to avoid it. And figuring out when that's happening and what that looks like for me, and telling myself that I do have the strength and I trust myself that if I feel this right now, it's not going to stay forever, because feelings don't stay forever. And sometimes in moments, it doesn't feel like that. It's really intense. You're like, I'm going to get stuck here. So trusting myself that, I have the strength to not do that.
Absolutely. I think that's the scary thing, right? When we're in those places, and feeling so intense that it does feel like it lasts forever.
Mhm.
But yeah, like definitely reminding yourself, like, no, feelings come and go. And that's part of it. You mentioned that, sometimes doing like the cathartic stuff isn't always easy. And we often don't want to, but also knowing like that's also part of self-care. Like self-care isn't just doing the things that make you feel good. Yes, absolutely, in that moment. But I think also doing things like the journaling or you know recognizing what you're feeling and asking yourself what's going on, those stuff are helpful in the long run, right? So sometimes self-care is it's about knowing what's going to be good for us in the future. Maybe not now because it's really hard to face or tackle or do, but that it is part of self-care.
Something that I'm hearing too is that, and feeling, is that when we are able to focus on what's right in front of us, right? Whether it's what are we able to do for self-care right now, or what is just right in front of me with whatever it is that you're doing, right? When you only focus on that, which I know is easier said than done and easier said than felt, and it is an ongoing practice, and give yourself grace. When we do that, it feels more manageable. It starts to feel more manageable, I should say. I think when we see all the things that we have to do or all the expectations that we're placing on ourselves, then it becomes even bigger, even scarier, and we kind of retreat a bit more, and it's harder for us to kind of move forward in a way that we really want and need. So when we kind of tackle it one step at a time, I always like to say baby steps. I loved watching What About Bob, a movie when I was younger. It's a psychology humor movie, and they always talk about baby steps in that movie. I always say how important it is to one step at a time. One other quick thing I want to reflect on too is what I heard a lot of what Stephanie was saying is trust yourself. And I think that sometimes messages that we've received from other people in our lives maybe might inhibit us a tad from, or a lot, from trusting ourselves. And part of that inner healing and that inner work is making sure that we are getting to a place of trust and love inwardly, because that's also going to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of healing, I'm sure the two of you have done a lot of healing. What would be the piece you picked out and can give our audience some advice from that healing?
I'm reflecting.
Yeah, that one's a hard one.
Yeah. Give yourself time. I think a lot of us really want things right now, especially when we're in pain, right? Like we kind of need it right now. And hard work takes hard work, and I think that sometimes it feels really big and really scary. And if we recognize that we absolutely can handle this, we take it one step at a time, and that it is going to take some effort and time, that will help with healing. I think that sometimes we will see people who have more healed parts of themselves, like, oh man, like, how come I can't be like them? Comparison is the thief of joy. I know that's such a cliche saying, but it's so easy for us to compare ourselves to others. I think just making sure that we remember that what we see, what you're hearing right now with all of us, this didn't happen overnight. All of our own healings have taken time and effort, and a lot of behind the scenes work that other people don't see. We tend to see people's highlight reel. It's very easy on social media now. Oh, I want what they have. Oh, why are they so happy? Oh man, they have so easy for them. We don't know that, right? That's our perception based on the snapshots that we're receiving, but we don't actually have the full story. So our perception is only a sliver of reality. It's not necessarily full reality with what's actually occurring for another person. So just keeping that in mind and continuing to proceed with gentleness and grace.
Yeah, I mean, adding on to that, I would say that remembering that healing is a process and it's not point A to point B. You're going to have days where you feel great and like, oh, I'm awesome, I'm healed. And then next week, it's going to all come back, and that's scary. But that doesn't mean that the week after that you're not going to be moving up again. It's a process, it comes with time, and it's not linear. And that healing does not mean forgetting. And I think that that's a big thing. To heal does not mean I wake up one day and suddenly everything's all good, fine, dandy. It's like nothing ever happened. It's okay to still feel those feelings. And feeling is in and of itself healing, which is super confusing. So also the thing I've learned is that it's confusing, but trust yourself and time, and over time you'll find out what works for you.
That is awesome. That is great advice, and hopefully our listeners can pick out a snippet from all that you guys have shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having us on, and thank you to everyone who's listening right now. Sending you so much love and healing and compassion. You're not alone. We're all in this together.
We are all in this together, and that's so important. I hope our listeners can feel that energy from us. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.